Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. Imagine I said to you, how was Shabbat? And you said, oh, we had lots of guests over for Friday night. Well, I would ask you, who did you have over? But would I ask you, what did you serve? What was on the menu? That seems irrelevant. In this week's Torah portion, the Torah tells us about Abraham sitting at the door of his tent 3 days after he had a circumcision, looking for guests to invite into his tent. And the Torah says he sees 3 strangers walking towards him, and he runs towards them and greets them and invites them into his tent to sit outside under the tree as he prepares a meal. And the Torah says he brought them bread and water, and then he ran to his wife Sarah and said, let's prepare cakes and cookies for them. And then he runs to the stable, and he gets a calf, tender and good, and he prepares it for them to eat. And while they're waiting for the meat to get ready, he gives them cream, chema, v'chalav, and milk, and goes into a detailed discussion of the menu that Abraham served his guests. And the question is, we know the Torah doesn't add extra words. Why spend all these verses telling us what he served the guests? Why is it relevant what he gave them? What's important is that he was hospitable, that he invited guests into his house. Why all this detailed information about the food that was served? And the rabbis go so much further to say he gave them tongue, which is the best part of the meat, and he gave them mustard. Why all this information? And the answer rabbis tell us is that we know that the more effort it takes to perform a mitzvah, the more reward one receives. Furthermore, the more tsar, if there's actual pain involved, then that's the ultimate performance of the mitzvah. But if you are having pain in doing a mitzvah and you still do it with joy, there's nothing greater than that to God. And therefore the Torah describes that Abraham was in pain. He just had a circumcision at an elderly age. It was the 3rd day of the circumcision, which is the most painful day. On top of that, he was outside on a boiling hot day looking for guests. And the Torah says he was sitting. Why does the Torah say he was sitting at the door of the tent? Because he was in so much pain he couldn't stand. But suddenly when he sees guests, he gets a burst of energy. He's joyous and he runs and says, please be my guest. Come sit under the tree. And he says, here's some water and bread, and let me go run and get a calf. And he can't do enough for them as he tells Sarah, let's prepare cakes for the guests. And therefore the Torah is depicting not just that Abraham was hospitable and kind, but he did it when he was in pain. And not only did he do it when he was in pain, he did it with the greatest joy. And that's why the Torah savors everything on the menu, because to God, everything on the menu was so delicious. Look at everything he prepared, the elaborate meal, how he didn't just satisfy them with bread and water, but he wanted them to have milk and cream and meat, and on top of that, cakes. And that's the message of the Torah. The Torah is saying is that when we do a mitzvah, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's difficult, even when we're in pain, but we don't do it like a burden, we do it with a smile, with joy, so the recipient can be happy. There's nothing more precious, more joyous, more beloved to God, and therefore God records every detail of Abraham's menu. And it's true with our lives too. God records every detail of effort we do that takes effort, and even if it's painful, but especially when we do it with a smile, service with a smile. Because if you don't do it with joy, then the recipient cannot enjoy it as well. There was a woman from Detroit. Her name is Fagi Slunny, and she has a daughter, Gitti, who lived in Israel. And in 2001, she went to visit her, and she was on the street on Yaffa with her daughter, Gitti, and she sees Sbarro pizza. And she's like, is it kosher here? I know in America it's not kosher. And her daughter, Gitti, says, yeah, Mom, here it's kosher. She says, let's go in and have some pizza. And they went into the Sbarro pizza shop. And unfortunately, it was the day of August 9th, 2001, and a terrorist came in and detonated a bomb. And her daughter was at the table, holding a table, as she was walking back from the counter with her tray of pizza and food, and the bomb detonated. And the mother, Fagi, her tray went flying in the air. And not only her tray, but she was lifted off the ground in the air. And when she landed on the floor, there was glass and smoke everywhere, and she was alive. And she turned to someone and said, next to her, I said, what was that? She thought maybe the oven exploded. The person said, no, it's a pigua. And she said, what's a pigua? She didn't know what the word meant. He said, it's a bomb. She said, oh my God, she started screaming for her daughter, Gitti, Gitti, and thank God her daughter was there, and they ran out of the pizza shop. But then as she's talking to her daughter motions to her ear, I can't hear. She lost her hearing. And so the ambulances came and she told the paramedic, my daughter can't hear. She said, we'll take her to the hospital. She said, I want to go with her. He said, we can't, we have so many casualties, we don't have room for you. And so they took the daughter off and she remained standing there on the street. And she wanted to leave, but her shoes had blown off in the attack when she flew into the air. And there was glass all around and she couldn't walk. And suddenly a young woman sees her and comes over to her and says, here, Geveret, I have an extra pair of slippers in my pocketbook on me. Takes it out and gives these black slippers to the woman, to Fagi. And Fagi says, what's your name? I want to give it back to you. He says, don't worry, just take it. You don't have to return it. And she put on the slippers and walked away from the scene of the attack. And Fagi Sloney lives now in Detroit, and she tells this story, and she takes out these black slippers, and she says, I still have these slippers in my closet. And every time I'm not feeling happy, something's bothering me, I have a problem, all I do is go to my closet and take out these black slippers, and I put them on, and I walk around in these slippers, and I'm reminded of the fact that God saved my life, and the kindness of random people on the streets of Jerusalem, and suddenly all my problems melt away. And perhaps why the Torah tells us all these details is not only because Abraham exerted effort and it was painful for Abraham, but because the guests were in pain on a boiling hot day. They were dehydrated, and a stranger came and invited them in. Abraham. The Torah is saying when you perform an act of kindness to someone who's in pain, who's vulnerable, that act of kindness, they remember every detail. It's the most precious form of kindness. Have a wonderful day.